The television had been on for 7 days straight. Every night, that flickering blue glow lit up the inside of the neighbor's house like a slow pulse. No one had seen them leave. No one had seen them come back. Curtains drawn, windows sealed shut, gate locked from the inside. But the TV was always on. It started to bother me around day 4. At first, I just noticed it in passing, that dim, grainy light behind the second-floor window when I was out feeding the dog. Then I realized it hadn't turned off in days. Same dull flicker, same corner of the window. We live in a small Russian village, the kind that gets swallowed by silence when the snow hits. Most of the houses here are either empty or belong to old-timers who mostly just nod at you on the street and shuffle away. But the neighbors, the ones who lived 2 houses down, they were different. A couple in their late 40s. Quiet, polite. No kids. Not exactly sociable, but not strange either. The woman's name was Larissa, I think. Her husband might have been an electrician or a welder. No one really knew for sure. They mostly kept to themselves. But ever since last Sunday, no one's seen them. I knocked on their gate on Wednesday just to check. No answer. I waited a minute, listening. I could hear faint sounds from the house. A man's voice, a laugh track, someone shouting in a game show, all coming from the TV, and that flickering light. I went home, figuring they'd gone somewhere and just left the TV on by mistake. But by Friday, the snow started falling, and there were still no footprints in or out of their yard. No chimney smoke, no signs of life. Just that light, that sound, that endless static. By Saturday, even the village postman asked if they were away. I said I didn't know. But something about it was gnawing at me now. You don't leave the TV on for a full week unless something's wrong. Even the dog started growling when we passed their gate. This morning, I couldn't take it anymore. The yard was still undisturbed, a perfect layer of untouched snow. No footprints, no tire tracks, just a pale blue glow bleeding from behind the curtains. I called their names over the gate. Nothing. Then I climbed the fence. My boots sank into snow that hadn't been stepped on in days. The house loomed quiet. Too quiet. I knocked on the front door. Still nothing. But the TV was loud. Loud enough that I could hear it from the porch. I walked around the side, peered through a narrow gap in the curtains. All I could see was the reflection of the TV on the living room wall. Fast-moving images. Color. Sound. But no people. Then I tried the door. It wasn't locked, and the air inside was warm. By the 8th day, I couldn't take it anymore. At first, it all felt like typical village monotony. In the morning, the distant hum of a tractor. Midday, chickens clucking at the gate. By evening, the village fading into stillness beneath a leaden sky. But the neighbor's house, it was like a splinter in my mind. I couldn't stop staring. The TV was still on, the flickering light pushing weakly through thick curtains, pulsing like a lighthouse, pointless and constant. But not a sound, not a creak, not a step, not a whisper. I started staying up at night just to listen. I sat at the kitchen window, no lights, a mug of tea gone cold in my hand. Sometimes it felt like something was humming from their house. Off. I thought maybe it was a fridge, old wiring, maybe feedback from the TV. But the sound shifted. Sometimes it felt like whispering. Sometimes, like something scratching along the floorboards. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the TV was picking up weird frequencies. Maybe interference. But then one night, I heard it call my name. Pavel. Pavel. I flinched so hard I almost dropped my mug. The voice didn't come from the street. It came from inside their house, through those drawn curtains. I stepped outside in my slippers, shivering from something colder than the air. I stood at their fence. The TV light still flickered, soft and rhythmic, inside the living room. The house was silent, completely dead, and that only made it worse. I stood there, straining to hear anything else, hoping to catch some clue. But it was quiet again. The next morning, I went to the village office. "The Ponomaryovs," I said. "My neighbors. What's going on with them?" The old woman behind the desk didn't even look up. "They left." "Left where?" "Do I look like their secretary? Into the city, I guess." "On business." "They've been gone a week." She nodded like everything was fine. "And their lights? They're on." "So they're on. Electricity's paid. Why do you care?" Something stirred in my chest. Frustration, fear, both. It felt like everyone had agreed to pretend things were normal, but nothing was normal. That night, I grabbed a flashlight, put on my heavy coat, and stepped out again. Their curtains hadn't moved. Still tight, still hiding whatever was inside. But now the light in the bedroom started flashing. Not the TV, an overhead bulb. It blinked steadily. Light. Dark. Light. Dark. As if someone was sending a signal. I stood there, frozen. That blinking light, it wasn't random. It was too steady, too deliberate. On. Office on. Office A pattern. My first thought was Morse code, but I didn't know it, and honestly, I was too scared to move, let alone try decoding anything. The air felt heavier than usual, the kind of weight that settles behind your ribs and makes you forget how to breathe properly. I backed away, but when I turned, I saw her. On the edge of the property, half hidden by a broken fence post, stood a woman, hair loose, wearing something long, maybe a bathrobe, or just a nightgown, barefoot in the frost-bitten grass. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there, watching the house. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture, it made me sick to my stomach. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the flickering window like it had wronged her, like it had taken something. She didn't even blink. "Ma'am," I whispered, though I have no idea why. The word came out raw and wrong. She didn't respond, just stood there, still as the trees. I went back inside, locked both bolts, pulled the curtains, pushed a chair under the handle for good measure. The blinking continued for another 2 hours, then stopped, like nothing had happened. The next morning, I walked to the edge of the neighbor's yard. No sign of the woman. I finally walked up to the front door and knocked. Nothing. I waited. Knocked again, this time louder. The door creaked open a couple of inches on its own. Inside, it was warm, stuffy. It smelled like old carpet and stale food. The TV was still on, showing static now, spitting white noise. I stepped in slowly. The air felt wrong. Still, like the inside of a sealed box. There were 2 coffee cups on the table, both half full. One had lipstick on the rim, slippers near the couch, a folded blanket. But no people. "Hello," I said, stupidly. Pointless. I moved through the house slowly. It was small. 1 hallway, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom. All empty. The beds were made, lights off. But in the back room, the one with the blinking light, I found something that made my legs nearly give out. On the wall, drawn in small, careful letters, with what looked like charcoal, were 3 words. "Do not answer." I ran. That was the last day I saw the TV on. By the next morning, the house was dark. Curtains still drawn, but the light behind them was gone. A week later, the village council sent someone to check. They broke in, declared the house uninhabited. "Must have moved out," they said. But no one ever saw the Ponomaryovs leave. And I still don't know who, or what, was trying to make contact through the blinking light. Or why I sometimes wake up with the TV on in my living room, even though I haven't owned one in years. It started with a glance. Our family moved to the village after Dad's second heart attack. The doctor said fresh air, a quiet life. So we left our Khrushchevka behind and bought an old wooden house on the edge of a forgotten settlement in Tver Oblast. My parents were happy. I was 17. Not so much. The village was like every other you've passed from a train window. Crooked fences, barking dogs, empty roads. Half the houses were either boarded up or sinking into the soil like tired animals. The others were inhabited by silent old people who nodded instead of speaking. We moved in mid-April. The snow was still black in the shadows, and the ground oozed with meltwater. I remember the first time I saw her. She stood across the street, behind the brittle wire fence of her leaning house, wearing a gray shawl and an old dress that hung loose on her like a wet sheet. Her hands were folded over her belly, and she stared directly into my bedroom window, not moving, not blinking. I laughed awkwardly and waved. She didn't move. I closed the curtain and forgot about it. But she was there again the next day. And the next. She was always in the same spot. Rain, wind, early morning mist. It didn't matter. The old woman stood there like a lawn ornament nobody remembered placing. Same shawl, same dress, same stillness. Hands folded. Head tilted slightly down, but eyes always locked on my window. I tried telling my parents, but they brushed it off. Old folks are just like that, Dad said, pouring sunflower oil into the frying pan. Maybe she has dementia, Mom offered. Don't stare back and she'll stop. But she didn't. One night, around 2 a.m., I got up to drink water. The house was dead quiet, our old floorboards groaning under my feet. I went to the kitchen, turned on the dim light above the sink, and instinctively glanced out the window. There she was, still, watching, but not from across the street. She stood in our front yard, behind the wooden gate, barely visible between the fence posts. The same folded hands, the same downward head tilt, the same stare. I backed away so fast I knocked the kettle off the counter. My dad came running in, half asleep and panicked. I told him. I swore up and down I'd seen her standing outside. But when he opened the door, there was nothing. Just cold night air and a quiet, empty yard. The gate was locked. No tracks in the wet grass. He looked at me like I was cracked. "I think all this quiet's messing with your head," he muttered. I didn't argue, but I didn't sleep either. I stayed up the next night. I didn't tell anyone. I just made up an excuse to sleep in the kitchen, pretending it was cooler there during the heat wave. I left the curtain half open and sat at the table, arms folded, eyes trained on the window. For hours, nothing. The street was still. No dogs barking, no footsteps. Just the hum of moths colliding against the bulb over the sink. But around 3:12 a.m., the porch light across the street flickered on. And there she was again. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. Only this time, the streetlight glinted off something around her feet. I squinted. Bags, big ones, like the kind you'd use for potatoes or laundry. One was open, and I could swear I saw a flash of something pale, skin-colored, folded inside. My heart was hammering. I grabbed my phone and took a picture, then zoomed in. The screen froze for a moment, then went black. Just black. I restarted it. Same thing. Whatever photo I'd taken was gone. And when I glanced back through the window, the old woman was gone too. The next day, I walked across the street in daylight. I'd never really paid attention to her house up close. No one did. It looked abandoned. Faded paint, sagging roof, broken glass covered with makeshift plastic. There was a mailbox nailed to the gate with a name on it. I froze. It was my last name. When I told my dad, he didn't speak for a long time. Then, without looking at me, he said, "That was my grandmother's house. She died in 1989. No one's lived there since. He said it like he meant it, like he believed it. That evening, I watched the window again. Nothing. The following day, nothing. Weeks passed. She never came back. But the worst part wasn't the silence, or the photo that wouldn't load, or the name on the gate. It was the knock on my window. Just once. 2 weeks later, at exactly 3:12 a.m., 3 slow taps. And when I opened the curtain, there was nothing there. Nothing at all. But in the condensation left by my breath on the glass, a message had been drawn from the outside. Just 3 words. I still watch.